I was teaching Ezra Pound to box, gaining no traction. His moves brought to mind the scuttling of a sleepwalker with lockjaw. I decided the best thing to do was take him to the Cirque de Hiver over on 110th Rue Amelat. There I could show him the difference between the palookas and the boxers. It was a brisk walk in the cool evening air. My old waterproof smelled of the rum I'd spilled on it at the cafe on Place Saint-Michel. Earlier, when one of the pivrats had bumped into me, she stunk of gin and garlic and growled at me like a bear cat. I offered her my apologies, only to be met with profanity, rude gestures, and something about her bohemian gypsy boyfriend taking care of me if I didn't leave. I wasn't afraid of any boyfriend, but I had better things to do, and this was the last few hours before I'd meet with Ezra. Ezra was excited, asking if the waiters really boxed. I told him they did, and there was some of the best boxers ever seen, always struggling for recognition and standing. And there was always the beautiful ladies at the boxing matches, and the stands always reeked of sweat and expensive perfumes. The wind barreled down the boulevard as Ezra and I crossed over the sign. I thumbed the worn rabbit's foot in my pocket. It was good to keep luck so close. The worn sinews contrasted with the cold silver spoon Gertrude Stein had given me earlier that afternoon, previously. Stein and I spoke of the arts as we usually did. A painting she had recently purchased of a child eating, and made mention offhand that my son Bumby had started on solid food. She gave me a scolding, as per usual, then handed me the silver spoon, adding that it would be fine for Hadley to use as a gift, as I didn't have much of any other silverware anyway. I accepted, if only for the sake of pleasing her. The thought of trading it to the old man with his stalls of books beside the sign passed through my mind more than I cared for. If you were lucky, you could barter for 2 or 3 English novels, since the French counted them of little to no value. Back then, books always were counted against lesser essentials. Ezra interrupted my thoughts. Hem, will you look at the moon? It's beautiful tonight. I saw, but didn't care, still bothered by Miss Stein's curious and unwanted gift. Looks much the same as last night. The city of light dulls the moon. I don't think it looks as good anywhere as it does here. No, it doesn't. Ezra stopped short, looked at me. What's gotten into you? I'm just tired. The moon does look beautiful. He kept staring. We continued on to the Cirque de Hiver. Not far to my right down the boulevard, there was the race course where I had lost again. I hoped the boxing would prove better tonight. Even if you were punched in the face and lost, a good fight made you feel alive. Losing a bet with the horses only made you feel like a fool in the grave, helpless and ashamed. But a modern-day coliseum like the Cirque de Hiver is a great oval, ample seating, and it made me feel alive to be there. So despite the wonderful lights and exotic scent of 1,000 perfumed patrons, the fights were poor, and the boxers juvenile. I knew I couldn't teach Ezra everything I needed to do, so we walked on. We drank beer during the fights, and afterwards went to the Belle Esprit for a café crème until it cooled enough. And then we walked on. It seemed a long walk. We stopped for drinks again, discussing the subjects, but then turned to find liquor. I hear the absinthe is good here, said Ezra. At least Olga said it was. I smiled at that. We drank the pale jade liquor and laughed about forgotten friends and remembered enemies until it was very late. Said my goodnights and stumbled down the Luxembourg Gardens as a shortcut home. Night can be graceful tonight, as well as the inspiration. So I would write tonight. Gossamer shadows danced and flitted on the edge of vision. I wondered who they were and where they were going. I did not feel ready to go home just yet, and then I heard an odd sound. A sick dog barking or coughing somewhere in the darkness. Turning, I bumped into that pauvrat from earlier. She was in no better mood. Her androgynous raven hair was a mess, and she stank. She greeted me with a slew of coarse language that only made me laugh. She raised a fist to strike at my chin, and even with the absinthe flowing in my blood, I easily blocked her clumsy attack and laughed again, which made her angrier. Le loup, she shouted. I was puzzled. Now, she must have been even more drunk than I realized. Would someone come running thinking that she was calling me a wolfish rapist? Surely there could be something more in Paris tonight. But experience had taught me that people will do and believe anything. I had no worries as the shadow people were all gone. I didn't even hear the low mutter of Paris any longer, only the somber fall wind. She cursed me again. "You talk a lot of rot. Stay away from me," I said, turning to head home. And like a good boxer, I kept a peripheral eye on her and knew she was 20 paces back when a silent, brawny bulk slammed me to the ground. The wind was knocked from my lungs, and I lost a little absinthe right there on the park ground. A strong, hairy hand clutched at my shirt, popping off several buttons. An ungodly smell seeped from the man who I could only assume was the gypsy boyfriend. He coughed, and what sounded like tuberculosis, with the moon dripping behind him, masked his face in darkness. I sent an uppercut to his long chin. I felt his body roll away as I kicked him to gain footing in time. He was strong as any man I've ever fought. I could see I could not release myself from his hold. I only then began biting down and drew blood. He howled like an epileptic dog and let go. The woman was laughing insanely, and I have seldom beheld a more wicked countenance than hers. I turned to face the man, regretting I did not have my knife. That was when I knew the absinthe had struck me harder than I would have believed. What I thought stood before me looked more like a wolf than man, a wretched mongrel cross, something out of a pale jade-induced nightmare. The woman was shrieking, "Leloup!" must have fouled my already ossified wits and birthed this hideous mirage. The wolfman coughed and howled his bloody rage. I brought my fists up to box him, since I was too soused to think of anything else. I wondered if the ruckus would bring out gendarmes. For once I'd hoped they'd come quickly. He charged faster than I was prepared for, had me on the ground in an instant. Long claws clawed and tore at my clothing while I kicked and punched. I felt ripe gashes open and bleed all over my chest and face. The son of a bitch enjoyed his masquerade, howling again. A blow to the head caused stars to explode across my sight, far more than any of the decorating the sky. Was this the end? Would I die here in the cold? Nothing more in my pocket than a rabbit's foot and silver spoon? Silver! Son of a bitch! I yanked the spoon from my jacket and pressed it against the bastard's face, and he howled again, this time in pain. A hard slap of the spoon from my grasp. Again he slashed and tore, clamping a hairy hand across my throat. I tried to escape but couldn't budge beneath his weight. The moon cast an eerie light over him, revealing a spoon-shaped burn across his cheek. The wolfman leaned in, exulting triumph. I fought back, pressing my thumb into the yellow orb of his eye. He reeled back, twisting on the lawn. I frantically reached for Gertrude's gift. I felt the blows of the woman's handbag on my back, but ignored them as I traced my fingers through the pale dead grass. The wolfman howled again. I sensed his approach. I touched the cold silver spoon. Never had such a delicate utensil felt so good, so potent in my hand. He grasped my left shoulder and spun me about like a rag doll. I faced him, plunging the tiny cupped head right into his eye. I let go, and the spoon standing erect from his face, a tiny arrow of swirled flowery fletching. The wolfman's remaining eye flickered. He froze like one of the statues on the Kabul Mufar. The woman screamed again, but no longer in joy. The wolfman took a precarious step, crumpled and slumped on his face. As he hit the ground, he curled into the fetal position, seeming to almost shrink, clearly an illusion of my absence. He let out a curious gasp, and I caught a whiff of the foul stench as his bowels loosed. The woman looked to me and ran into the night, gibbering like so many other perbots. In the distant darkness, I heard the gendarmes whistle. I wasn't about to wait for them. I had no wish to see the inside of the Bastille while they did their guesswork. I walked away briskly. Never spoke of the incident to another living soul. I still wonder what I saw that night. And the absinthe had proven more potent than that in Spain, because I never did hallucinate like that again. I heard some tales in Upper Michigan about wolfmen, but it was always so much rot. I told Hadley and others that a window had shattered on me to explain the cuts and bruises. I was laid up and sore for a week, but counted myself lucky. The next time I was out with Ezra, I declined any of their drinks. I made it a point to thank Gertrude for the spoon. I told her it found a good home. P.S. Ezra still can't box.